Hello and welcome to another episode of the Time for Impact podcast with me, Chris Wade. And I would normally say at this juncture with Matt Cobble, my co-host, but sadly, Matt is stuck on a train somewhere between Liverpool and Tamworth, last time I heard, in the UK. So he's hoping to join us before the end of our conversation, but we'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, I'm here, and more importantly, my guest is here, Katerina Manoff, from an organisation which some of our UK listeners will perhaps be less familiar with. I could be corrected there, but will be more familiar perhaps in the US and maybe other parts of Europe, as will become clear in a second. Katerina's from an organisation, she's CEO of an organisation called ENGin. So hi, Katerina.
Hi, thanks for having me, Chris.
My pleasure. How are you? I hope you just come out from leave, so you're probably absolutely flustered. And
Yes, it's always coming back from vacation is a little overwhelming, but I'm actually very energized and excited to jump back in. It's the magic of vacation, right? Like you look at everything with new eyes and new energy.
let's see if I can keep that energy going for you for the next hour or so, or next 45 minutes or so. So yeah, tell us about yourself and about ENGin and how you came to be running a really innovative volunteering organization.
Sure. So I was born in Ukraine, and it's sort of been my lifelong dream to run a nonprofit helping Ukrainians. I was that weird kid, where everyone wanted to, I don't know, sell ice cream or be firemen. And I was like, actually, when I was little, I said, I want to have an orphanage. I want to be an orphanage director and have an orphanage for Ukrainian kids. Well, as I got older, my dreams became a little more sophisticated, I suppose. I always was thinking about, well, how can I help young people in my native country? What can I do? Growing up, you're not really told like how to end up at that destination, how to build a career running a nonprofit. So I ended up actually going into the corporate world. I was an investment banker for some time. Then I went into education, worked for some educational organizations, startups, and charter school networks and such. And about 5 years ago, actually, just celebrating our fifth birthday. So 5 years ago, I launched ENGin. I had this idea through working as a volunteer, actually another small organization helping Ukrainian youth. I was working with a young woman who was an absolute genius, and I was helping her apply to university. She really had so much potential. She wanted to get the best possible education, and she wanted to go study abroad. So we were working on applications in English. We were speaking in English. We're communicating by email, and her English was excellent in writing because she'd been studying it for over 10 years. But when we got on for a Zoom call, she couldn't talk to me. She was just scared and never had the opportunity. And so that gave me the idea to connect Ukrainians to English speakers to video chat for 1 hour a week. Essentially, that's what ENGin is. It started really for improving English, but it's become so much more than that. We realized that the cultural exchange aspect of these weekly conversations, the friendship and emotional support, the mentorship, there's so many dimensions of just when you connect people one-on-one, just like you and I are sitting now, and you just let them talk, and you do it every week for several months. Some people do it for a couple of years. The relationships that develop, the value that both participants get out of that, the volunteer and the Ukrainian they're working with, is just tremendous. So came upon this model, saw how well it was working, and have been really focusing for the last 5 years on scaling it as much as possible. And we recently hit 55,000 participants. So something I'm very proud of.
Marvelous. Yeah. I mean, what a brilliant model. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came? I mean, I think you're right. I even in my sector, I've very rarely, I don't think I've ever met anybody who said to me, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a volunteer manager, or I wanted to work in the charities. People just don't have that dream. So it's interesting to me always in how people find themselves in our profession. And I am, you skirted over it, but I am really kind of interested in your background, particularly in learning, and how that, from presumably in the corporate world of learning, how that led you into thinking, well, I can apply those specialist skills and that experience that I have to do something in the NGO sector.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to tell you this is somehow planned, right? And there's some sort of logical route here. I'm a big believer in fate. I talk about my career path as more of a career labyrinth. I really had no idea how it all turn out or what to do. And actually, I had my classmates, all of them, going into traditional business jobs, investment banking, management consulting, some corporate finance, hedge funds, that type of thing. And people stayed in those jobs. They maybe jumped companies, but they were working in
Mm,
that same world. And everyone seemed to have it so together and be making a ton of money and know what they wanted. And I tried it and I was like, this is not for me. I'm not adding very much value to the world. I'm working all the time. I'm just very sad here. So I thought, I want to help people. I want to make a difference. Education. I always, love working with kids, working with young people. So I said, let me get my master's degree in education. And actually went to Harvard, which sounds very impressive. Academically, it was really fascinating. I learned so many interesting things about how we learn and education technology and psychology of learning, all these interesting topics. As far as finding a job and figuring out your career path, not a lot of support with that there. So I came out of grad school still very clueless, and then it really was, it's like, what jobs exist in education? Well, there's these charter schools, which are innovative schools that use public funding to sort of try new educational models. Sounded really cool on the outside. I did it for a while and I realized that how the sausage is made is really often not very good for kids. It was not sort of the world changing, people helping vibe that you would expect from the outside. And so then I went to public education, worked for the government, and again the bureaucracy and
mm,
the politics was really difficult because again I didn't feel like I was making anyone's lives better.
yeah.
And then just by chance, it's like a friend of a friend of a friend needed someone to help with a couple projects for a startup teaching English to Spanish speaking immigrants to the US. And I had studied Spanish as my high school and college foreign language. And so I was reasonably fluent in it. And so I did these projects for them and they liked my work and they said, how would you like to come work for us full time to help build this startup? And I did. And it was, to be honest, another toxic and frustrating experience where this startup did end up falling apart without fully launching due to, let's say, maybe bad leadership is the best way to summarize it. And there were some really wonderful people on that team. So it's quite sad for all of us, I think, when it fell apart. And so again, I was lost. And at that point, I'd had a baby, a toddler, and I was saying, well, let me just do some freelancing. So I did a whole bunch of random things. And then I wanted to give back by volunteering myself since I couldn't find a job where I felt like I was making an impact. So I just found online this organization that was helping Ukrainian teenagers apply to study abroad. And that's when I connected with my mentee Olena, and I just had this moment where I said, wait, she needs practice speaking. She needs someone to speak to. And I can do that, build something that connects people like her with other people one-on-one. And my experience trying to build the for-profit language learning startup that would be
Mm,
connecting,
mm,
completely different population for money with professional teachers actually came in very, very handy when building ENGin. But I couldn't have known any of this at the time, right? Like it just
yeah.
happened and then it worked and I just kind of rolled with it. And when I was doing ENGin, it was a volunteer project. I'd actually just had my second baby and I said, I'll do this 5 hours a week, while I'm on maternity leave, and then go look for a real job. And then it became my full-time job. And now we have a team of 30 plus people. And it really feels miraculous still looking back how it happened after so many dead ends and trying to figure things out, how it all fell into place. And now every week I get messages from people saying how my organization has made their lives better. So I finally got there, I guess,
How's
after a
that?
lot of searching.
Yeah, yeah, and I empathise. As somebody who started their career making war machines as an aircraft engineer, moved in to be a hotel manager, as a university lecturer. I don't know what else I've done before I fell into the third sector as myself. And so I don't think these careers are always that linear, or they need to be. And certainly, I
Yeah.
feel that this. I mean, I've been doing this for nearly
Yes,
thirty, nearly
exactly. I
30
think that's, yes,
years,
you're like me. You're a
but
wanderer like me, right? And you can't, I mean, you can never predict it, right? But then
No,
you
no,
just
no.
sort of end up where you belong. And if you don't, I guess that's a sign to keep looking and keep trying.
Yeah, and I think I think people who do that are usually people who say yes to everything, and that's why I always think that really works well in that sort of entrepreneurial sort of world as well, because usually you do that because you're excited by a lot of things, and it's really nice to hear that you want to make a difference, and you are making a difference, more importantly. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's.
maybe
I think a lot of people want to help, right? But like how, finding a job where you can do that and make money,
yeah,
that's another thing that, or some people say, well, I'm going to have a job that's not super meaningful, but it's going to, it's going to be my 40 hours a week, and they go and I can do something on the side which is meaningful. So that's another model of
yeah,
doing that. I think for me, it's, I basically had to create my own job too, right? To have a job where I
yeah,
can get paid and balance it with having kids and also make an impact and also be challenged, right? That's another amazing thing about building something new, is you get to learn and you're always growing and you never get bored. Like no day is the same, even 5 years later. There's no routine. And that's something that's really exciting because I'm
mm,
helping others, but like I'm really enjoying it for myself too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And of course, what you do now is you're also letting volunteers in to find out, as you say, their way to make a difference into other people's lives. So that's
Yeah.
great. So
I think empowering others, exactly. It's when you usually, right, when people are thinking about nonprofit work, it's, well, how are we helping our beneficiaries? And one of the most amazing things about ENGin is that actually our volunteers are benefiting, I would say, just as much. And
mm,
sometimes one of my most frequent comments is like, oh, I feel like I'm getting more out of this than my Ukrainian conversation partner is.
yeah,
People really feel that value, and in some cases actually influences their career choices. I have heard people saying, well, actually I want to I want to work abroad, or I want to become an English teacher after this experience, or
mm,
I want to start my own nonprofit. So creating really valuable volunteer experiences for people is, it's really special, because I wish I had someone who'd done that for me when I was younger
yeah.
and I was searching. So yeah, it's really empowering to see how this is helping other people find their paths as well.
The podcast is called Time for Impact because the organisation that I run, apart from being about volunteering, is also very much about the impact of volunteering. And so it's always really nice to hear those stories, and you should definitely bottle them or capture them somehow about these, especially if people
Yeah.
follow through and do become teachers or do start their own not for
Mhm.
profits. That's really powerful impact stuff, isn't it? So, but yeah, let's rewind a little bit and tell us a bit more about how ENGin works and how people get involved.
Yeah, so the core idea has really stayed the same since day one, right? You, as a volunteer, you just need to be someone who speaks English fluently. It does not mean you have to be a native speaker. I think 30+% of our volunteers are not, but they speak English fluently. I'm not a native speaker, so for me that was very important to sort of be open, right? To not privilege being a native English speaker
Hmm.
over or over those of us who have learned it
Yeah.
as a second or third language. And you need to have an hour of time and you need to have an internet connection, and that's it. So from the beginning, access was really important to me. We actually, when we started ENGin, we worked just with high schoolers, matching high schoolers to high schoolers. When you're a high schooler, you have a lot of energy, right? You don't have a ton of specialized skills, and many nonprofits will just say, it's not worth the liability, it's not worth our time, you can't come volunteer here. And I wanted to be different. I wanted to say, well, you actually have a huge gift to give as long as you speak English fluently. That is so valuable, and we want to make it really easy for you to share that gift. And as we've grown to support volunteers of all ages, core concept of access, has remained central to how we run ENGins. So really, anyone with an internet connection, English fluency, and an hour a week to spare can sign up and within a week or two be involved. It's very important for us to make it really easy. No deadlines, no limits, 365 days a year. So some people want to do it for a summer, some people want to do it for a semester, some people want to do it for 5 years. We welcome everyone. And we match you one-on-one with a Ukrainian who will have a similar scheduling, similar interests, their preferences. We look at a whole bunch of factors, and we're like a matchmaker, right? We're a matchmaker who then provides also support throughout the program to make sure you have a good experience. And you connect with your conversation partner, and you set a time, and every week you just talk. We have a lot of resources for guided conversations and different topics to explore, different activities, and most people start with those, but then many of them go off and just do their own things. based on their interests. And that's where it gets really exciting, because you can see what's interesting to me, what's valuable to my conversation partner. Do we want to talk about politics? Do we want to do video tours of each other's houses and introduce each other to our families? And do we want to talk about travel? Do we want to do career prep? Maybe, one of us is looking for a job, so we do mock interviews and resume reviews. Do we really, if we're working with someone who's a beginner in English, do we do more structured stuff where we're practicing different grammar concepts and learning more vocabulary? If I have a job that requires me to use English, and I'm the Ukrainian, right? Not natural for me. It's my first job where I'm using English. Am I role-playing conversations with customers and colleagues? So, are we sharing music? Are we playing video games together online and chatting about it as we play? I mean, there's just so many different things that happen in that hour. And because it's one-on-one, every pair gets to shape their experience. So we ask for a minimum of 3 months. And then again, it's, super flexible, right? Some people just want those few months to get that boost, to get that comfort speaking internationally, to make a friend abroad, and that's it. And then others really find a lot of value in doing it week after week, even if they're getting very fluent in English, just to have that person in their life who's going to support them, who's become a close friend to them. And so they stay in touch for, I think we just heard of 2 last week who had their 3-year anniversaries, and they just nice. keep doing those meetings. So that's what it looks like. So it's very simple, but also the complexity of all the different experiences that end up happening is hard to capture, because everyone chooses their own adventure, and that's one of the things I love most about it.
That flexibility, you say it's 72 weeks. Do people have to? I mean, do you set up the appointments, or do they set them up between themselves? Do you insist
they set
on
them
a
up
certain
between
frequency?
themselves. Yeah, I think that's also when you have group events, it's hard because you have to have centralized scheduling, and maybe this person can't make it, that person can't make it. But if it's one-on-one, or we're piloting right now a few matches that are 2-on-1, so we have a few like that. But even then, right, you have very few people, and you're just messaging on WhatsApp in between yourselves. I'm sick this week, can we meet the next day? Or I'm going on vacation, can we have 2 meetings the next week after I come back? So they all schedule it themselves, and because it's so individualized, it works quite well, and you form that relationship that really keeps you coming back, because it's not like a class. If I don't show up, the teacher will keep teaching to the other 20 students. Well, if I don't show up here, my volunteer or my student is sitting there waiting for me. So it really helps with engagement and continued participation.
Yeah, but if they're setting up themselves as well, I suppose there's a bit of flexibility. This week I can't do Thursday, but I can do Wednesday.
Exactly. Yeah, it's super flexible. And also, we do have our own video chat platform. We actually just put it in. But then if people prefer to speak on, I don't know, Zoom or Google Meet or whatnot, they can also do that as well and just track their sessions. So in every way, like when it's happening, how it's happening, what you're talking about, we try to be super flexible. And we found that that's really what keeps people happy, because they get to do it the way they want. And then both sides are quite satisfied.
Yeah, it's key in volunteering these days, is that flexibility. But you don't 72 weeks, but to give some flexibility, and also the flexibility. I've seen some of your model lesson plans, for instance. They're fantastic. But even within there, I can see there's lots of use your imagination, use your own nous to adjust these to your learner's ability, to your own interests and so on, which I think is great.
Yeah, I'd say exactly, because we know people are just so different and want very different things. Yeah, when we talk to our participants, we see that over and over, and everyone's very busy, right? That goes for our Ukrainians as well as our international volunteer base, regardless of their age or life situation. People are so busy and they have so many demands on their time. So if you want them to come to you and stay with you, you better make it worth their while, right?
Yeah. But also as volunteers, you want to be empowered to use your imagination and so on. And you don't want to be like robots, or worse still, you don't want to be all like employees. So it's, I think, that bit of flexibility, but yet giving a structure, because of the flip side to that, I guess, is that especially if you don't have experience in teaching, then you need some guidance in terms of lesson structures and ideas. Otherwise, that would be even worse for a volunteer, I guess.
That's exactly right. I mean, we work with volunteers as young as 13. So we see, with some of our 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and even some of our adults, they just want to use the session plans as they are. And so there they have, I think, over a year's worth of materials now. So if they never want to come up with an activity throughout their whole ENGin experience, that's fine. We have it for them. And then there are ones who get really excited about, well, I really want to create my own quizzes, questions, articles, role plays, and then they say, great, do it. So there's no right or wrong. I mean, there's some basic right or wrong, like you should meet with your person every week. You need to be respectful. But beyond that, It really tries to accommodate a whole wide range of personalities, people who want to be really creative and people who say, well, I just really have this 1 hour. I don't have time to prep, so give it to me. And I think that's one of the keys to our success, why we've grown so big, is that it's kind of a big tent and we have room for everyone there.
Yeah. But do you also get the opportunity for, if somebody tries something really innovative and it works, for them to write that up, send it to you, and becomes a future potential lesson plan for other people? Is there that sort of feedback loop as well?
Yeah, we have communities for our volunteers to share ideas. We have monthly volunteer meetings. And so these are some of the main ways that we have people share what they've come up with. And then we have our bi-monthly emails to volunteers. So yeah, someone writes into us with ideas, we feature them. We have our social media, we feature people's stories, and it's been really fun to do that, because sometimes people come up with such creative stuff that I wouldn't have ever thought of. Like, we have one Ukrainian who's actually a teacher, university teacher. She had her volunteer come and visit her class and talk to all of her students, and that was really fun for all of them. It really just amplified the impact there, because now these however many college students are benefiting from that volunteer's time, in addition to her matched conversation partner. So people come up with like little projects they do together. I mentioned video tours. That's something that that was driven by the community. I didn't come up with that, but a Ukrainian will go and say, okay, I'm going to do errands. Like, come with me to the post office, on the Facebook video or WhatsApp video. This is how the post office works in Ukraine. Here's me getting, a Christmas present for my kid. Here's what our toy stores look like. Yeah. And then, vice versa. The volunteers will show, well, here's my town, here's my community, here's my school, my post office, my library, my house, my neighborhood. And yeah, a lot of ideas like that we really try to listen to the community and then amplify the best ideas so others can try them too.
A shout out to my colleagues that probably won't know them in the US, but the New Citizen Project over here, they always used to put up a slide that it always stuck in my memory, about how to involve your community or volunteers, fundraisers, whoever they might be in your organization. And I always remember that list to start off with: can they tell stories for you? Can they generate new ideas? Can they raise money for you? Can they introduce you to somebody that's going to, leverage more power or more influence to your organization? And I think once you really get a not-for-profit off the ground like that, it starts off, as you describe, in doing the core thing, which is helping people learn English. But actually, before you know it, you've got this community of wonderfully skilled people beyond what they've done for you, who can bring so much fresh and new ideas beyond, of course, your brilliantly talented, I'm sure, but small staff team. And I did notice on your website you've got a list of all your people, and you've got volunteers doing lots of things like interviewing and doing other skills as well now within the organization, which is great to see.
Yeah, we're always thinking about how else we can involve volunteers beyond the main program, right, which is this 1 hour a week, or and some just want to work with more students. So we have volunteers who work with 2, 3, 5 students, and so they're contributing more hours, just doing the same thing with more conversation partners. But then others say, well, how else can I get involved? And this is actually even a really interesting challenge, right? Because not all tasks are great for volunteers. And so you want to harness that energy in a way that's really respectful and rewarding for volunteers, and also sort of fits within the organization's capacity. Because to give volunteers tasks and expect of them to give more time than they have, or not give them the right support answering their questions, giving them materials they need to succeed, that's not really fair to them. And sometimes, volunteers get very excited and there's not necessarily a way for them to plug in. So that's actually been, it's an interesting challenge that we've been working on. And we have developed various different pathways for volunteers to help the mission. For example, by spreading the word and helping recruit more volunteers. That's something that's very customizable, very much fits into what a volunteer can do and realistically is able to and wants to do, because it's not a huge time commitment. They can do it in their community, and they can really connect to local groups in their communities in a way that we could not. So that's another area where they add a lot of value on their own time, as much or as little as they want. We do have on our main program team volunteer interviewers who screen participants, which we have to screen every potential participant individually for safety and to ensure program quality. And that's something that you can easily train them, and they can do 5 hours a week. So that's another thing that's worked well for a certain type of volunteer who's very outgoing and wants to meet a lot of people. But yeah, it's, I'm sure everyone who's listening to your podcast, who's in the nonprofit sector, will relate to this. We perennially get the question like, oh, why can't you get a volunteer to do this? Like to use volunteers everywhere for everything, and that's not
No, that's not the
realistic,
answer.
right? Once you get past a certain size, there's things that need to be done by staff members, because a volunteer isn't going to sit there for 40 hours a week, and do administrative work. So so we do have different ways for volunteers to get involved, and it's been really challenging and interesting journey, sort of figuring out those limits. Actually, just today posted this framework where it's like 5 criteria when you're seeing like, can a task be done by a volunteer? Things like the time commitment, the skills, the staff support, the retention. Do you need someone in the same role for a year or 2 or 3, or is it okay if a volunteer drops and you just get another volunteer? And so it's something we think a lot about. And I think when done well, you really can plug volunteers in certain places, and they can really be complementary to your program team and add a lot of value, while also finding the experience very rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed again on your website there was some really good job titles, like volunteer experience, learner experience, and I really liked it. May sound a really simple and obvious thing, but I really liked the framing of the roles around experience, where so often you see manager, coordinator, etc., etc. I think really naming it to say that your role is the experience. And I don't know if that comes from the learning world or the digital world or elsewhere, but I think it's a really good way of framing a volunteering professional's role.
Yeah, I think, that this is something that's probably, now that you say it, has to do with my more for-profit background, because I always think of it all as customer service. And our Ukrainian students are customers, and our volunteers are customers. And my job is to give both sides a 5-star customer experience. So I think that in the nonprofit world, traditionally, that you don't always have that view, right? Like volunteers are more like resources, and then you're beneficial people who help. But yeah, I think thinking of everyone as customers, even if they're not, obviously, they're not paying us, or our volunteers aren't, that really goes through a lot of, when we think about organizing, definitely you have the volunteer experience and the student experience departments. We have a customer service department. And we're always thinking through that lens. And also, I wonder if funding plays a role in this, because I know that a number of charities, they are funded by some big outside organizations, and their customers are kind of those guys, because they're giving the money. For us, we're actually mostly funded by our volunteers, and also our students pay like a one-time to join the program. It's very small, because we want to be affordable, even for Ukrainians in wartime, but it does kind of make them customers. And so we're accountable to our participants. We don't have some big foundation, for better or for worse. I mean, it makes it hard to fundraise, but it's great because we are independent and we can really serve our participants, and there's no conflict with their needs versus the needs of someone who's giving the money.
Yeah. I can almost hear our regular listeners groaning when I say, it's really important not to speak of volunteers as resources, but to think of our customers or as a community, because we have that conversation so often. But it's so true that we absolutely need to get out of that mindset where we think, well, how do we fill, it's almost like a human resourcing model. How do we fill this space with a new person to do this? How do we, you said that, it's not right to have staff doing everything in the organization. Well, one of the reasons why it's not right to have them is often that those roles are often things that are more like jobs, that they are resourcing roles, and they're not the sort of things that volunteers should be doing. So yeah, it's really refreshing to hear that, and please spread the word and keep that going. That's fantastic. I wanted to ask about how the organisation's sort of grown over the 5 years, because again, perhaps from a volunteering perspective in particular, one of the challenges a lot of more traditional organisations often face is growing the numbers of volunteers without growing the budgets and the staff support base that goes with it. And I'm sure you have been growing those things. It seems that because you're very much in the digital world in particular, you seem to be able to be growing the number of volunteers, and you've got nice systems and materials that enable them to be effective without having to have lots and lots of one-to-ones and ongoing support. Have I read that right?
Yeah, so our size is definitely a challenge in that, the traditional way that people do volunteer management, we can't do it, right? We have right now, I think, over 13,000 active volunteers. We've had over
Wow.
26,000 since launch. Not all of them are currently active, although some do come back, which we love. But so the numbers are huge, right? And so your traditional model is you'll have, I don't know, 50 volunteers or 25 or 200, but somewhere like that. And so you have one person, maybe you'll have two if it's a bigger volunteer organization, who is the volunteer manager, and the expectation is they know each volunteer one on one, right? They answer all of their questions and they're that point of contact. And yeah, I'm not going to say what's better or worse. I mean, the fact is, like, we just can't do it, because then we'd need to have 100 volunteer
Thousands.
managers to handle that caseload, right? Maybe more. So it's not going to happen. So we needed to sort of train some of our volunteers who have been with other organizations, who have seen that model, who are asking, who's my volunteer manager? Where do I email? That you're not going to have a person. It's not going to be one person. We have a customer service team that has a bunch of agents, and that's how you get the quickest reply. And they're separate from the people who are overseeing the experience, who are doing the training, who are doing the recruitment, who are doing your interview. So it's built more like as a factory, yeah. And it's still, it's still human, and it's still focused on you having a good experience, but it's not going to be the same human that you're interacting with.
Yeah.
And we've just sort of experimented and iterated based on feedback, and it seems to work well. I mean, technology is the other key piece. Having a really strong system that we built, because we didn't see anything like this on the market, where people can apply and go through, without a lot of support from us, all the onboarding steps, and then get started with their student, having the resources, having the reminder emails, having a very clear step 1, step 2, step 3, click here and do step 1, you're done. Great. Now step 2, It's something that I get a lot of compliments about, because people will say, well, I wrote, to 5 organizations to volunteer and I didn't hear back. And so this is the downside of having one, overburdened volunteer manager whose job is to recruit them, train them, support them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then you don't actually hear from them anyway, because they're completely overwhelmed usually.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But if you have the system there, people really like that sort of self-service. I click and I see all the interview times. I just click and that works for me. If I can't do it, I don't have to write to anyone. I click cancel and I pick a new interview time, right? The training, we have the times you sign up for them. If none of them work, we have the video. You watch it on your own time. It's very quick because of that. And so despite our numbers, people get started volunteering with us faster than they would with traditional organizations based on the feedback we hear. Like I said, someone who's motivated can be, within the week, can be meeting with their student. Some people, they're busy, they want to wait. It'll take them a couple of weeks, but it's very, very quick. And so technology and having this distributed model where different team members are responsible for a certain thing and they do them really, really well at scale has helped us and manage the volunteers. And then you said it's hard to attract new ones. I think for us, just having the experience be really valuable kind of helps it sell itself. Like, people are really enjoying it, so they tell their friends, they leave good reviews, and being digital helps with that. But also it's the fact that we're really setting it up so anyone can participate, and they really get a lot out of it in terms of that cultural exchange, in terms of making a friend, in terms of really seeing a tangible difference in the person you're helping with and feeling really good about that, in terms of improving their communication skills. I mean, there's just so much that they get out of it. And I think that's why we've been able to attract and satisfy so many volunteers.
Yeah. And, I think people lose maybe the personal contact. That's just impossible, as you say. But actually what they are getting is a much faster system, a much more responsive system, getting a response probably immediately, because it's all done by a computer. They've got flexibility, as you say, because they can self-serve, which I think people really want these days. So I think it's the way to go. Even if people aren't working at the scale and the global reach that you are, I think there's learning for other organizations, certainly medium-sized organizations. Even if you are meeting with your manager in person, can we use technology a lot better to do the onboarding or to do some of the frequently asked questions kind of stuff really quickly, rather than having to wait for an overworked volunteer manager to get back to you about X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, even when we were small, before we had the system we built, it was all, free or mostly free. Google Forms connected to Google spreadsheets, and then formulas, automations. We use this thing called Zapier.
Yeah.
Basically, if a cell changes in a spreadsheet, right, it'll send an email automatically. So there's really low cost ways actually to do this. And they worked for us until we were well into the thousands of people, I want to say, before it got so big that it just wouldn't work. But certainly if you're working with, tens, hundreds, or even a few thousand volunteers, you can do it in an automated manner without hiring staff. I get very excited about that because I think having the most impact and helping the most people is really the goal for everyone. It doesn't need to be that all the efficiency and high tech is for the for-profit sector, and nonprofits have to act like as if it's like in grandma's age where everything's by hand and it has to be done personally. I mean, automation can be. I'm not a tech person at all. I have to say, like I'm terrible with technology, and I was able to figure this out 5 years ago
Well done.
without much money or help. So it's definitely doable. If someone's working with more and more volunteers and it's getting a little overwhelming, I would really look at automations and through Google Sheets and Zapier and tools like that to make it go more smoothly, and it actually results in a better volunteer experience, like you said, because it's faster and it's more in their control to go through the steps and get their questions answered and so on.
And we often talk in here, or at least comes up from time to time, about career paths for volunteerism professionals and so on. And we often talk about the various skills that a modern volunteering professional needs to have under their belt. And they don't all have to be digital wizards, as you've illustrated. But I think if you're leading a volunteering program or activity, then I do think it's important to have in your mind, or keep exploring and researching the options and the ways of thinking how digital can, reinvent the way that we do things in the volunteering world. Hopefully not replace like for like, but actually find new solutions to do things which are, as I say, we talk about flexibility, we talk about responsiveness, we talk about inclusivity. All these things are a lot in volunteering, but we often, because volunteer managers are often incredibly good people, they're good at human behavior. Sometimes the mindsets or our time is not always focused on the digital solutions to these things. But if we want to expand and reach more people, especially, and I work with lots of clients who have that issue, they do a brilliant activity through volunteers, but actually want to reach far more beneficiaries. Well, sometimes your friend is the technology, I think, to find those solutions. So it's really refreshing to hear your story, but also I guess you probably do bring something. Although you tell me you're not a technical person, you probably bring some experience from other industries that you've worked in that's probably helped shape some of that thinking.
I suppose from investment banking, I got comfortable with Excel formulas, although I can't say I was using the same ones on my Google Sheets there as I had been in banking. But yeah, I mean, we've had a number of team members in our organization who came in really not being friendly with spreadsheets, and then I just give them tasks, increasing complex, and they figure it out. So it's something that I do think is very accessible. And speaking of career paths, I mean, I think for me, professional growth and for myself and my team is really important. I think about this a lot, and we've promoted a bunch of people, things like that. But mostly, we're all growing just by growing the organization. And for me, this is really cool that I can be learning new skills and doing new things without having to change jobs, either internally or externally. Like all of us are just figuring out, well, how do we do this better, and how do we do this for more people? And then, how do we do it more efficiently so we're not working all the time, because work-life balance is really important. And I feel like so much in the nonprofit sector, we're expected to make up for resource deficiencies by working 60 hours a week. And this is just not not sustainable. And I'm not doing that. And at some point I realized that I needed to keep myself strictly to 40 hours a week, where I would burn out and I would leave and there would be no more ENGin. So, it's just not, I think sort of doing everything by putting more time and you as a person, you're not growing and you're not feeling good after a while. So yes, I think figuring out systems and processes is a really great way to grow your skills and have everything be more sustainable. So there is less burnout.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Lessons for us all. I certainly could learn from some of that as well. You've touched on it several times, but I just wanted to perhaps steer us into that conversation around mutual benefit of what volunteers get, the transactional level, if you like, of return that volunteers get from being involved. You mentioned some of the case studies about people wanting to be potential teachers and so on, but I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what you think the volunteers get from getting involved.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up because this is like yet another one of my favorite things about ENGin, which I just love talking about, that we build, mutually beneficial and equitable relationships. And that's so different from this more traditional mindset of like a victim and a savior. And it's something that I found problematic in the nonprofit sector, long before I was part of ENGin, actually, because we're all people, right? And we need to respect each other. And it's not that anyone is like saving anyone else. I think that our volunteers, because we have such a diverse volunteer base, right, in terms of age, geography, it's like over 140 countries, in terms of their life stories and experiences. There's really a bunch of different motivations. So one really basic one is in the US, a lot of high schoolers need community service hours to graduate high school. And then people who are in college, they need them sometimes if you're applying for medical school, that's one. So depending on their paths, students need to have a certain number of hours. And if you're a busy student, maybe without your easy way to transport yourself, you don't have a car, right, or someone to drive you, don't have any specific skills, it can be really hard to find those hours and meet your 50 or whatever, 100 or 25-hour minimum. So it's very practical. That's actually how we started. Like, that's how we got volunteers, because they needed the hours, and we gave them a really fun and flexible way to get those hours. We have people who want to socialize more and build relationships, right? The loneliness epidemic, it's a whole other topic, but it's an issue that I think exists in many countries and it exists across generations. So, I used to think it's actually older people who are loneliest, but research shows that young people are equally lonely or even more lonely. The ability to form a meaningful relationship is something that a lot of people are, they talk about it, that they found this really special friendship that they never would have had otherwise. And especially, a friendship across borders, a friendship across difference, because usually, whether it's online or in real life, we're interacting with people who are like us. And at ENGin, you interact with someone who is nothing like you. And it's really sweet. I've had students say, like, I got paired with some 75-year-old guy, and like, I'm 28. What am I going to talk about? We're going to have anything in common? I'm terrified. But then, like, months later, we're the best of friends, and I look forward to him, and I've introduced my family to him, and like, I write down things throughout the week that I want to tell him about. If I read anything about the U.S. news, I'm going to ask my volunteer to hear his take on it. Yeah, and it's just really wonderful to bring people together like that. I think since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a big part of it is the frustration and anger and hopelessness that people feel. And this is true whenever anything terrible happens in the news, right? And we can't do anything about it. Maybe we send a donation, we don't really know what happens with it, and like that's that. But here's a way to take all that dismay that you get when reading the news and say, well, I'm going to help. I'm going to make a difference. And that's very, very rare that someone can actually connect directly from something terrible they're reading about on the news half a world away to something they can easily do. So that's another thing that brings a lot of people to us, and we hear people feeling like I'm feeling better about this because I'm actually taking action. Like, even this year, on the third anniversary of the full-scale invasion, we had a spike in volunteers. I don't think it's coincidental, right? Yeah, so it's really different motivations. I think there's also people like sharing their professional background. So people who have had a career and they really want to share their wisdom and give back. Someone younger who's trying to pursue the same career, that's something that people have mentioned is very rewarding. I think there's probably others, but we have, I would say, a half dozen different motivations that drive people. The flexibility, I think, is the last one I'll mention, because people want to volunteer, and then they can't find the time. We talk to people who have an intense job and they have got kids at home, and they really have struggled to find something that fit their schedules and would be flexible enough. To, if someone can't meet at the same time every week, right? A lot of nonprofits will say, well, we need you here 11 o'clock on Wednesdays, or that's it. We can accommodate that. So people are very grateful to be able to volunteer when they previously thought they just wouldn't be able to, given their schedule.
Yeah, sure. I was going to say with the younger volunteers, but it probably equally could be true of any age group, but it also builds people's confidence by having to those conversations. But also, we need this more than ever in the current political climate, I guess. Is it also helps, I imagine, helps people sort of broaden their horizons. It's so easy just to be stuck in that echo chamber, isn't it, of hearing the same old voices, the same people, as you said, who look and sound a bit like me. And both for the volunteer, well, probably more for the volunteer than for the person from Ukraine, but for both parties, it must be quite a horizon building.
Totally. I think it's, yeah. I mean, for our Ukrainians, I mean, one quick thing: Ukraine is an all-white country, right? And there is, there's unfortunately like some attitudes of like, I've never talked to a person of color before, and like, but then actually we have a ton of volunteers. We don't collect the data, but but just from knowing many of our volunteers, it's just such a racially diverse group and internationally diverse group. We have huge contingents of volunteers like from India and different countries in Africa, and of course the United States, where most of our volunteers are from, just because I'm here and I was able to recruit more here. An incredibly diverse countries, so it really does open people's horizons. And yeah, on the flip side with volunteers as well, although one challenge is that the people who tend to sign up for the program are already more open, so it's, I mean, it helps, but I don't know that you're necessarily changing any minds. If someone hates Ukraine, let's say they diehard MAGA fan, they're probably not going to sign up to help a Ukrainian, right? But what does happen, I've heard from multiple volunteers who live in very Republican areas that, they tell their family and friends now who are, maybe not very sympathetic to Ukraine. It's not politics, it's stories. It's like, here's what my friend in Ukraine,
Yeah.
some people call them like my Ukrainian daughter or my Ukrainian grandson, or my Ukrainian best friend. Like, they get very close and they say like, hey, here's what's going on in Vitaly's life. Here's what's going on in Anna's life. And so
Humanizes
through,
it.
it's kind of a butterfly effect, right? It's not just our volunteers, but the people around them who may not have been that receptive. They hear these stories, and we're sharing these stories worldwide. And I think that really does make a difference in terms of opening people's minds and broadening their horizons.
It's very easy to think of something like Ukraine or Ukrainians in a very abstract terms, but once you start talking about Natalia and her
Yes.
day-to-day human existence,
Yes.
it makes people remember they're talking about human beings. So I think that's
Yes,
got to help,
exactly.
isn't
It's
it?
exactly. It's a very human. Yeah, it's human to human, right? It's like as personal as you can get.
Yeah, sure. Well, anyway, so brilliant to hear about all that. Well, let's see if we can get you some more volunteers. So once people have finished listening to their Time for Impact podcast, of course, then they're bound to have some time afterwards. So if people
Yeah.
want to get in touch and will get involved, how do they reach out to you or to the organization?
Absolutely. So we are always welcoming volunteers. We actually have quite a need now for adult volunteers, so anyone 18 plus, because we've had an influx of students coming in. So people can go on our website, www.enginprogram.org. So that's ENGin program.org. And there's just a join button. And like I said, it's all automated. It's all online. You create an account, you go through the application, you schedule a 15-minute interview with one of our team members, and then you sign a program agreement. And we have a 2-part training to make sure you're all ready to go, which can be done live or asynchronously. And that's it. We would love for anyone listening to check us out. And we've definitely been trying to expand outside of our main focus area of the US. So I know you have a lot of listeners in the UK and maybe other areas outside the US. Would love to have you join ENGin. And if it's not the right time for you, there's on our website, there's a time option to sign up for our newsletter so you can stay up to date with our news and maybe sign up later. And there's also materials you can share with others.
Yeah. Last time I looked, and I haven't looked for a while, there was something like 20 odd countries represented on the podcast. So it reaches quite far. And
Wow.
I'm assuming it's because it's an English language podcast, everybody's pretty fluent in English. So who knows? And if they want
Well,
to, if
English is the
you
core
never know with
language.
technology, maybe it's been translated. And if people want to get in touch with you or the organisation in terms of their volunteering experience, in terms of learning from your volunteer management journey, I'm presuming they can do the same thing, get in touch through the website.
Yeah, so if anyone who's in the sector wants to connect and share experiences, I would love to do that. Then they can email me directly at Katerina@enginprogram.org, and I would be happy to chat. We're very committed to sharing what we've learned and connecting with other organizations. I think we all don't make enough time for that just because we're all so overwhelmed and busy. But I've really been trying to do more of that this year and talk to others and share what we know how to do, what we're struggling with. So happy to get in touch with anyone.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much for joining us. It's a brilliant program, backed up by some brilliant technology, concepts, processes, and of course, people. Encourage everybody to go and check it out online. I'm sure now they've heard you speak, they've got a taster. They will be on there already. It's a brilliant model, of course, for people in Ukraine. or Ukrainians elsewhere in the world, I guess, but he's also a brilliant model for the sector. So thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for your great questions. It's been really fun talking to you and sharing our story.
Hi everyone, Chris Wade here, just with a final remark. I hope you really enjoyed this episode and are enjoying other episodes of the Time for Impact podcast. We'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts. Please do get in touch either in the comment section or by dropping us an email. We always love to hear from you. You can follow us, subscribe, or whatever the terminology is on your platform. Please do, so to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. And if you liked it that much, you can even buy us a cup of coffee, and I'll put a link to that in that option in the show notes. It's a virtual coffee. Don't worry, you don't have to take me to Cafe Nero. And just to remind you that obviously Time for Impact is a volunteering consultancy, training provider, helping people write their volunteering strategies, organize their volunteering organizations, choose a technology that they need, measure and leverage the impact of their volunteering. So if you need any help with consultancy, training, mentoring, or anything like that, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until the next episode, bye for now.